important to figure out how mature the ideation has become. Past ideation, now it's what they call ideation in entrepreneurship. Ideation, you usually, so for these guys there, I said, okay, what technologies are available? What's the wicked problem you're trying to solve? That kind of stuff. And how close are you there to it? Who are your people? I keep going back and you have to match up with what you need or you're dead before you start. And I think Eclipse ended up losing something over, or very close to $2 billion. And it's just because they didn't do things like this. It's not that hard, you know. And they could have said, well, geez, I need somebody from an aircraft, you know. It sounds like everybody should just do it. But if you don't have a process and you're really in love with your baby, you know, my mama thought I was good looking. you know, you've got to get to a point where you can say my baby's ugly.
I do have a question on TRL.
Sure.
And you probably covered this before.
No, in class.
But it was between 6 and 7, you have demonstration in a space environment.
Well, that's in the environment. Hey, boss. That's for the environment that you're going to use it in. NASA built the TRL levels.
Right. And so I'm trying to think, but so as far as, you know, for their prototype here, I understand in the relevant environment, but to distinguish between 6 and 7, how would they do? I mean, is that just kind of lump it?
Well, systems are model prototype demonstration in a relevant environment, in a space environment. So an irrelevant environment usually still means not quite space, right? So you might show it on a let's say we're doing clean water. You might get a pipe in your house or excuse me, in their building and show how it works in the building.
Dirty water land,
yeah,
clean water.
Yeah, that kind of stuff.
Gotcha.
So it's there's a guy named White. If you read anything, the guy's great. He's from San Diego. I don't know. I never told him to tell me he's great, and he's boring and something like that. But he's very knowledgeable. He's usually worth his time if you're really interested in this. Anytime you get into entrepreneurial activity or new product activity for a firm, and you're not using this, and I guarantee you, until 3 years ago, Joe does not use this yet. Bob Sachs started to use it when we started to play with him. That kind of stuff. It's just, and I just try and find tools that help. Does that make sense? All right, let's move along, as they say. Most are 1 through 9. Some people have it to 11. I believe 3M has one that goes 1 to 11. But basically, there's a reason why the colors change. 1 through 3 is, can it do it? The next is for the technology that goes into a product paradigm, is the technology robust? And then 7 to 9 is product iteration. Right? Make sense? And these are just, I didn't put up the questions, but here, I put them here. If I were going to use that on any of your little things, that's what I do. I think somebody's already done that. All right? Do you want me to go over these things, or this is something you can do? Any question? You had a question between 6 and 7, or 7 and 8?
It was 7 and 8.
Yeah.
Just, you know, for non-space.
Yeah. So it's in an actual system. That's why I changed it from space on this, right? In an actual system, prototype system that is near or at planned operational system. So it can be in a wind tunnel if you were looking at it like this. All right, stuff like that. Does that make sense?
A little bit.
So you'd have a controlled experiment. I talked to you about the Japanese beetle trap, where it's usually Marquis level. It's prototype, you know, number 2. I put all the bugs on one side, put a thing there, lifted it up, it knocked over, got on me, and my mom gave me a lecture. All right, does that make sense? questions about this? How risky is it? The next tool we give you, it's just a step by step by step by step. So all the tools I give you are relatively easy to use. You just put it on. And if people, and you're using your judgment, I think that people's judgments are the best thing to use. And the risky thing is the technology market matrix tool. Okay? You guys remember this, it's a combination of how good is your army, how good is your competitor army in the battlefield, right? And I said no matter what strategic theory you use, it can be put in this model pretty much. Would you like me to go through that stuff, or you want me to show examples on this? We'll use your examples if you like. Yeah. Okay, which one is he doing? Which?
The grants.
Okay. All right. So basically, risk and reward should go together, right? And these two matrices, one is for the competitor and one is for the firm under discussion. So we did grants, we did full. Why don't we do Roswell? All right. Okay. So at Roswell, God knows what he wants to do with it. But again, for Joe, this is exciting because Joe sees a relatively unique piece of property. He understands unique pieces of property. He knows that's good. And Joe is one of the most instinctively entrepreneurial people I've ever met. He's very good at it, right? And he goes, I know I can do something with that. And I said, okay, let's say we were going to do algae, even though that wasn't the product he wanted you to look at. But we could use the same thing. So for Joe, even though he's read about it, has he ever actually produced algae? Probably not. But let's say it's at least expanded for him, okay? So that going along the top, be it expanded. Is this a new market for him? Energy. Is energy a new market for him? Has he ever sold energy? The only thing he's done is he put that real estate in with the hydrogen, where he wanted to put the hydrogen fuel cell or something like that, right? All right, so let's say they're right in the middle. Let's say that's an expanded market for him and an expanded technology for him. He is right in the middle for that. Well, down the road is a company called Sapphire, all right? They're making algae. That's all they've ever made. They've got $300 million or something to do it. For them, growing algae for fuel is an existing business. They were part of the Continental. You guys, anybody fly Continental or United? Well, I do. So Continental and United had this big biofuel study where they were getting algae-produced biofuel to fly 737, I think it was, or 757, I don't know, one of those things. And they got it from Sapphire. So this is 110 miles down the road, and this is existing. They understand the market. They can't sell to the market right now, and they understand the technology. So if they're in the bottom left-hand corner, and he's in the middle, stuck in the middle with you, is he in a much more relatively risky place than Sapphire? Who has the only, so you see large firms every once in a while will decide to get into a business even though there's a strong entrepreneurial or small firm. They do that because they have $1 billion or $100 million they're going to spend on it. And they may win and they may lose. But that's why they do it. So Joe is wealthy. He's made good decisions. I'm sure if he had to, he could put $10 million down on something. But if you look at Sapphire, you'll see that they got a lot of money from the government. They got $50 million from the Gates Foundation. They got $100 million from some other foundation. So there's more resources at their issue. So in this particular case, he's at a much more risky position should he use algae. Does that make sense? So if you're taking more risk, you should be getting more reward. And he's not going to get more reward because the other people have more money. They're much more knowledgeable on two risk dimensions and financial. Have much more finances, much more greater understanding of technology, much greater understanding of the market, even though he has a cool, really interesting and unique facility. So in the past, I've told him, what's that word that he now knows better than I know? Argumentum.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I can't say. Anyway, but that's, so if you look at the stuff of nutraceuticals, which is what nutraceuticals or homeopathic medicines are climbing in use faster than traditional medical technologies are. So if traditional medical is growing at a rate of 4% a year, nutraceuticals last time I looked, which was about a year and a half ago, was growing about 1.5 times that, or 6%. I don't remember the numbers, but if that makes sense to you. So I said, well, what can we do with algae, which is not what he's asked you to do. As a matter of fact, he's asked you not to do that. What can you do with algae that is good? Well, that can take advantage of things. Well, algae can make an awful lot of fish oil, or the adjuvant oil. And there's ways to go about looking at that. Is it in demand? Is the price going up? Is the production going up? Is it 2 times the product, which it is? So that's an interesting product for that. Now, why is the problem with algae? You know, you have to know something, I guess. But the problem with algae is it's just like everything else. In the wild, you don't get a monomer strain. You don't get a unilateral strain. You know, it's like all of us. Very few of us are even Irish, English, Scottish, Spanish, Native American. We're all kind of a mutt, right? We're all mutts. So if you're all mutts, the percentage of oil from that mutt strain of algae is much less than if you have genetically selected strain. So for you guys, that gets interesting if you have a controlled environment, because then you can get a genetically interesting chain. And for you guys, this would be more interesting for things like, it was really made for water purification. You got all those ponds over there, and I think there's a chance that you can use the kinetic pump as kind of a anchor type of technology to attract other people and stuff like that. But that's what you do. So let's say we're doing that, I can't say the word, the A word. But let's say we were doing the A word. That's the word. All right, but let's say we were doing the A word. Does Sapphire make it? No, they don't. Do they have a facility that would allow it to be addressed? No, they don't. So for them, that would be a brand new technology. So is nutraceuticals anything they know anything about? Absolutely not. That's also a new technology, new market. So they're way up in the right. And one could argue, if you have a interesting facility, you might be an expanded technology, or something you can control. Interesting? See how it's used? You're just trying to find out, only thing you're trying to find out is how risky are you doing this. In other words, does it make even sense to even think about it? With Porter's 5 forces, we're talking about where to place it. The big problem with Porter's 5 forces, and I told you about it last time, is everybody looks at it, the unit of analysis for this tool is industry profitability, not firm-based profitability. And yet, I don't know how many times I get a paper from a student, no matter how many times I say it, they're looking at what do the 5 forces do for my personal company's profitability. That's not what the tool does, right? All right. So what do we do? Well, this is great for doing broad strokes on things, which I think is what you told me. And how can you make a process that looks at things? Let's say, no matter what he says, you want to look at algae for fuel. I don't care. You know, that's up to your choice, right? Well, how can we use this little puppy here to take a look at profitability for industries? All right, let's take a look at algae for fuel. That's one of the industries you could use in both of those companies. You could also do it for Veritran. You're trying to take a look at, in that case, it's how do you reduce the operating costs in a facility, right? But let's take a look at this, all right? First thing I tell everybody, industry rather than firm profitability. Industry rather than firm profitability. Industry rather than firm profitability. All right? Market-focused strategic tool. Not my best thing, but it's something I know how to do. And so do you. Everybody does. How does technology affect the forces? We talk about that. And I show you, somewhere around here you have this. All right? So let's just take a look at, let's just do this for algae, for fuel. So we're looking at sustainable fuel. What's the sustainable fuel industry look like? Okay, do we have industry rivals? We've talked about Sapphire already, right? We've talked about big wind farms in class, right? We've talked about how you can use the waves in the ocean as energy. So there's a lot of technological substitutes. The higher number the technological substitutes, the lower the profitability is for the industry, unless you control profit. All right? Suppliers. Well, let's take a look at that. The more unique you have as a supplier base, the more difficult it is for an industry to be profitable. All right? So if you had to buy single strain algae cultures, there's probably not that many you could buy it from. I don't know, but if I'm guessing, that's what I'd say. All right? But for everybody else in the industry, there's a lot of suppliers. There's a whole bunch of aircraft manufacturers that are now making the big thing that goes around for the wind turbines. I can't say the word. The wind turbine. What do you call it? Propeller. Propeller. There you go. It's not called a propeller, but I think that's better than anything I know. But then you look at barrier to entry. All right, if you're going to do barrier to entry to make a wind farm, is significant. It's significant. Because each one of those little puppies costs $1 million. I don't know, you have to find out. But it's not trivial, right? So barriers of entry for wind is big. And now you're having a whole bunch of regulatory barriers to entry. Why do you think they'd have regulatory barriers to entry for wind farms? Migratory birds. The best places for wind farms are right in the path of migratory birds, and they're killing endangered species all the time. They're doing it here, they're doing it everywhere there's one up. They're doing it in Denmark. Denmark's crazy about it, stuff like that. So there's regulatory barriers to entry, there's scale and scope barriers to entry, and there's IP barrier to entry. So let's say that all of a sudden somebody figured out a new way to get oil out of algae, the biggest problem. And they can do it in 2 seconds and do the entire, but that's IP. So only one person owns it. That's a huge barrier to entry. The higher barrier to entry in an industry, the more profitable it'll be, because that means fewer people can play. Does that make sense to you? Industry rivalry, the closer you are to monopoly, in other words, the fewer credible rivals you have, the more profitable the industry is. buyers, that's what they call a monopsony, if you're into economics at all. Like, for example, there's been an industry for years that there's two companies that make it. They make weather balloons. Well, who buys weather balloons, really? U.S. government, that's it. So, would you like to be an industry where you just get dictated to what your price will be? Well, that's probably not going to be a profitable industry. So if I was in that industry, I'd be trying to make something else like balloons or something like that, or anything I could. So this says, and you can do this for different industries. So when all of you find an industry that you want to play with, right? All of you find an industry, you do this for one of them, and let's say you have a second industry. You do that for another one of them, right? Does that make sense to everybody? So you say, we've looked at, all of your alternatives could be this. We look at this, the alternative for this, don't look good. The alternative for this, don't look good, but it looks better than that, right? Does that make sense? Easy to do? Let's go back to this one for a second. I didn't do the second thing. Same thing, if you have alternatives, let's say for Novozymes, you have different ways you want to do this. You make one a square and one a circle, or one a star and one a red button. And you do the same thing you do, let's say, whatever anybody's strategy is for that. You take a look at your alternatives and you see where they are, red button to red button, square to square, star to star, best competitor, what you could do. Does that make sense? All right. Is that useful for the 5 forces? And this is, you know, let the force be with you. Buyer power up, the profit potential down. Profit barrier to entry high, profit potential up. I did that right so far. Supplier power high, good, power down. Technology substitutes many, potential profit down. Rivalry high, potential profit low. Right? Makes sense to everybody? All right. How do you get there? And this is the thing I said I may give you on the quiz too. So just so everybody knows, I haven't made the questions yet, because I don't do reviews before, because I'll always go to the questions I would ask. That's just the way it is. Yeah. And, all right. And this here is Jeffrey Moore, right? And I've tried to cut this one down. So for everybody's product mostly, you're trying to go nowhere, your Novozymes or all the other people, you're at the chasm. So we can just forget about these things, forget about the technology visionaries, because they're already using the stuff, and we'll look right here, right? So how do you get there? And you might remember in class where I talked about the probe and learn method. This is it. Remember, if I did this right, let me see if I still have this stuff. Oh, so I took a look at the different groups, and this is all about how the different groups think, and this is really important. So we're really interested in the visionaries and the practitioners. So visionaries are already using most of the stuff if they're using it. That's where, like in the ozone, you got people starting to play with the cold plasma ozone. You got people trying to play with the other things, but they're just really in the visionary stage, right? And this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get across this. You might see three little things. That means, you know, I worked in commercial development for Fortune 500 company. I worked on it for a 5-person company. and you just got to try. And the smaller you are and the resource poorer you are, you got to be better. Because you don't have a lot of chances to do more things. So, so this is what most people do. They do everything they can initially to get like a big egg. They're going to bet the farm on the first thing. And if you look at lean startup stuff, if you look at Eric von Hippel's stuff that I asked you to look at, if you look at any of that stuff, the science of muddling through, they'll say, take baby steps. They'll say, just try and get something out there to have people look at it. It's called the minimal viable product many times. Any things like that. It's been around for 60 years. People have been trying to do it with various degrees of success. And so you've got to find a way to get your potential customers, and you can do a lot of things about potential customers. You might remember the video that we did on innovation and spaghetti. So if you do traditional marketing stuff here, you get hammered. You just get hammered. Because you remember Ragu and what's the other, Prego, right? And for 50 years, both of them have been doing traditional Delphi method, focus group stuff, all that kind of stuff. Doesn't work. Why doesn't it work? Because they've got to touch it, feel it, taste it to get an idea if they want it. So you got to give them something they can touch, feel, taste, see. I started doing videos and cartoons for everybody on cartoons, but the cartoons actually get people laughing and whatever, and they're relatively easy to do. And videos require a real prototype, and a lot of times you don't want to show a prototype. Would you want to show that prototype of the ozone thing to anybody in the municipal water supply?
Not yet.
No, absolutely. Better to make some sort of cartoon up, show them what you want to do, right? So that's about what they call canvassing in a lot of books I read, which this isn't an entrepreneurial class, but I like entrepreneurship, so you have to bear with me. But usually, this is what you want to do. You want to make little different samples. You don't want to have ostrich eggs or dinosaur eggs or something that costs you forever to get it. You want to have little ideas, and you start going and trying to find the interest groups, right? And that's what you're doing, right? That's what you're all doing. And that's what they're doing in Novozyme, right? I'm not saying that they're doing it well. They came in with their idea, they did this first, right? We have this company, we're going to split it out, and this is what we're going to do. And then they said, why aren't these guys buying this stuff, right? Not usually a good idea. So that's that. Is that okay? Did I help all you guys? We'll do this tomorrow in class for the people who aren't here, I guess, but I know you have to hand in some of the things, but not for the final project. I'll do it. Is this fun? A little bit of good, well, maybe not fun, just fun for me. But, okay. Is that okay? Did I do good for you? All right. So abundance, you saw the questions. I just picked them out of things that I had in the past. I always like to put, so here's what your professor likes to do. He likes to pick a tool and something about Novozymes and say, hey, I don't know, I can't remember if so on these things, let's just, you have a whole bunch of about 7-page to 20 to 15-page chapters here, really small chapters. So there isn't a lot I can do. I mean, it's not as bad as you think is interesting. I think you'll have a good time with it. There's probably one question I can come up with. I think I gave it to you. I'll probably think another one. Ray Kurzweil and the Go Fast button. That's just the times 10 stuff. You all got questions. I don't know if you looked at them. Singularity is nearer. And does everybody know what singularity means? That's when artificial intelligence will equal human intelligence. All right? And since they called their university Singularity University, it's something that's important to them. not my favorite thing, but it is something important to the office. And we're not trying to get what I think is important, we're trying to get what they think is important. Oh, I should go back. One of the big problems with Jeffrey Moore's work in Crossing the Chasm is he calls it technology adoption. You might remember from class, it is not technology adoption, it is product adoption. People simply don't buy technology for the most part, they buy products. And therefore it's a product adoption cycle. And it's further product adoption cycle because you see the decline in it, because technology doesn't decline particularly. All right? So one of the problems with using it is you've got to remember it's really about product adoption, not about technology adoption. And I try to emphasize that, and I just did again. The tools of cooperation. Water, I think, is interesting. I gave you one of the two things they did. There's also this guy named Dean Kamen that they talk a lot about in the book. I can't remember, so if you have the questions, you've tried them, I don't remember them myself. Feeding 9 billion, I think that's interesting. I think it's important. It's one of those wicked problems I talk about, challenges for the 21st century. The maker movement and the do-it-yourself movement, it's, if you look at cars nowadays, it's hard to work on them yourself. So people have kind of lost that, and it is the stuff, you've heard the term kludgy, right? Kludge. The product looks kludgy. No? Yes? Everybody heard it? Some people have, some people haven't. Well, kludgy was, there was a guy named, I think it's Ron Kluge, I can't remember, at MIT. And he would put anything together you asked him to. It looked ugly, but it worked. It looked kludgy, it was big, huge, and it didn't meet form factor or anything like that, but it worked.
How do you spell that, just make sure?
I think it's K-L-U-G-E, Kluge. But the point is, that's what the DIY movement tends to do. It makes things that you may not want to have in your front room, but it gets the idea of what it can do across. However, with new things like additive manufacturing, and still, well, many people still call it 3D printing, you can get really pretty things now. You can get things that look really cool, custom design. And for an old car buff like me, this is great. So for example, I have a 51 Henry J, my daddy's first car. And you probably don't know what a Henry J is, not important that you do. It's a Kaiser, later on American Motors and people like that, bought Graham Page. But all the plastic things that hold the header up, well, after approximately 70 years, or 65, how bad do you think UV sun radiations got on it, and do they just break every time I touch it? They do. But now, if I can get the dimensions of it, I can make one using 3D printing. This is going to be godsend for us, like me, who have nothing else better to do with their life. And I like building things. I built one, I had a 53, and I gave, this is my mother's first car, and I gave it to my sister. If we had a 57 Plymouth, I made one, I gave it to one of my brothers. I don't really like driving one, it's like that, And, all right, and the rising billion, which is what he thinks is the economic driver for the new millennium, right? They're fairly straightforward questions. I might ask you something like, I sometimes put two things together. I think I did it on the first quiz. Something like, let's see, rising billion. What product, how would you look at a product using the technology market matrix for feeding the bottom billion or something? And I'd give you 4 or 5 questions, answers, and you say, and most of the time I say circle all that apply, or I'll say circle one, and it'll say all, and then it'll say none. Does that make sense? These are not designed, these are designed to make sure you've read the stuff. That's it. You know, it's not hard. Those are not hard. The mode in the first quiz was 4. That means 4 out of 5. Most of the people, if they missed it, did it because they made a mistake in how they answered things or something, which we tried to take care of. Or they weren't there. I think 1 or 2 people didn't sign their name. All the typical stuff, which I hope you agree with me that we should let them do that. Does that make sense? All right. What do we have? What questions did you have on the chapters in abundance? I mean, few of them are so small. If you can find a question other than the one I gave you, it would be amazing, right? But the only thing I think I didn't find any of my combination questions there. Right? But if I do that, it's not that hard. It's just that actually asks you to apply. Both the MBA should not only supposed to know the stuff, you're supposed to be able to apply it. Right? But I don't have a great variation between the first quiz average score and the second quiz average score. Most of the time, the people don't do well just because they haven't had time to read it, and I can't do anything about that. Any questions on did I go over through is this what you wanted? What would you like? And on the last one, Novozyme, this is to make sure that everybody reads it, not just the people that have to present it. and I think it makes sense to do. I tried to make the Novozyme case use the tools more from the back half of the course, and the FASA use the tools from the first half of the course. Right? Not saying that either tools are worse, it's just that I expect you to learn as you go. Does that make sense? Any questions on Novozyme? Did I do okay for you guys tonight?
Yeah.
Any questions on Novozyme? So one of the things that, I'll just say some things for me that never worked for Novozyme. It was so hard for me, even though I know it, I'm a biomedical engineer, I've done it. It's hard for me to think of enzymes as just a piece of protein or meat. It's just like having a piece of meat you don't cook. That's an enzyme. That's how you generate enzymes. And it's really that simple. And for Novozyme, they have really world-leading IP, things like that. And one of the things that I think I try to get Yorgos to stress, because it's something from the country manager that comes through, and something that's also true of Novozyme. The least technical product we have to look at in the class, the most technical product we have to look at in the class, is we see that the Chinese buying behavior is that they want good stuff cheap. They want high quality, low price. They're not willing to pay for quality. So I think, if I were to guess, I am pretty sure that what happened is they did this market study saying that the Chinese market is moving towards higher quality products. But they didn't take a look at the price sensitivity. They just did a typical marketing survey. Do the companies want high quality? And so they assumed it acted like any other market. All right, and believe me, at Procter, we made so many mistakes in that. So when we would go after Unilever and us were the two big hitters, right? And so we would go after, and I really got hired under Richardson Vicks at this time. And, you know, homeopathics, really high quality homeopathics. So when we took that to India, how do you think that did? Well, now I'll tell you, you can buy Vicks anywhere in India. I mean, most every prescription store, and there's all of them all over the place, you can buy it. But we left so much on the table, and there were certainly a lot smarter people than me there that just said, kept going back to Richardson Vicks at the time and said, it's a case in the blue book that I used to give because I lived it. And it's a case about trying to put your enterprise product on a new market, right? And that's what in some ways these guys did. They did it a little different, but not much. And not learning from that market and developing products that can go to other markets, right? It's a whole, so when my buddy became the vice president for business development for IBM, and we both had the same classes, what do you think he did? He went to IBM, you know, IBM for years, their enterprise product was the big mainframe computers. They developed 50 or 5,000, they had a goal of 50,000, I don't think they ever got there, new firms where they brought IBM technology with people from India and people from around the world, trying to develop products for their market and similarly turn it around and develop products for other markets. So people have got, at least the smarter people have got the idea. So, is that okay?
Do you know how many questions we'll get?
Fine.
Okay.
Not hard, but you'll have to read every line, you know. I think some people, it's not, you know, I forget, you know, I try, you know, my daughter has a learning disability, has some issues. And so a lot of times she just quits reading after she thinks she's got the right one. And I know that I do it too. I'm telling you not to do that on this class. You know, and that, you know, I learned from my daughter. Does that make sense? You haven't, you know, it should be getting a little more fun by now, because you get to learn the tools, you're starting to play it, you can see where you can help real companies, and unfortunately, I know it's stuff you haven't learned before, and we had some major difficulties the first class and a half. I'm sorry I was sick, sorry the video stuff didn't work, nothing I could do about it, but there we go. Anything else? Did you get more than you expected or less than you expected tonight?
I got more.
Okay, good. All right, good? Good.
Thank you.
So she's gonna try and load this, but I would tell you that she's having trouble with her thing, she says. So you might want to phone your compatriots. And, you know, I've heard from every company in the last week that's doing Novozyme and everybody that's doing one of the others. You guys can phone me anytime you want. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's go get her. That's me.
So we are doing the Novozymes and I'm doing the TNM. I guess I just kept getting confused just around hours. Putting that in there, so I did the X's and O's.
Yeah, I'm an X and O guy.
And,
XO squares, I can't do anything that's more than that.
we're going to start with the video, so we just wanna make sure
Ooh, lovely.
we can play it and then we'll go into a Prezi
Okay.
instead of a regular PowerPoint.
Hold on, I like Prezi.
Yeah, I had fun learning how to use it, so.
It's just harder to do for a class. I do a lot of Prezis when I'm making a 20-minute presentation.
My Prezi's pretty simple.
I'm a simple guy.
So, I'm not sure if I did it correctly.
so.
I guess I'm just thinking, I'm trying to see if I can open it.
Oh, you're the person of my
This
dreams.
item account. Why is it not letting me open it? Yeah, it's not letting me. So I guess I was trying to think, the 3 questions that it asked at the end is like, should they do the 2-tier? Should they do the new business model? I guess so, I guess when I was looking at this, I was trying to figure out, am I doing am I picking one of those questions to address in order to determine what the technology marketing matrix, what I'm looking at? So I started focusing a little bit more on the 2-tier model, thinking that that's not, like that both of them have existing technology and they both have an existing market, both the firm and the competitor as far as the low-end products. Is that?
So how we doing, okay?
You are.